our dear friend Daniel. And before we say hello to Daniel, we're going to play the intro, and then we're going to say hello to Daniel proper. I'm loving the look of this man right here. Go ahead, Manny. Hit the intro. My dear friend Daniel, welcome to the show, brother. How are you today, sir?
Good. How you doing?
Very good. Let's get a mic check on Daniel. Manny, can you turn up Daniel's mic? I can already tell he needs a little bit of love. Not that you might need a little bit of love too.
I always do.
Do you need a little bit of love? I think everyone in the chat send Daniel some love. Are we good on the microphones, Manny? My dear friend, how are you? Are you doing well?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Having an interesting day. Not in a bad way, not in a good way, just an interesting day.
Understandable.
So, yeah. It's a weird, because you know the whole fast thing. I feel it. I feel the fast. I feel it. I feel it. It's nuts. Speaking of which, so for those of you guys that don't know who Daniel is, Daniel's going to give you a little bit of an intro, and then we're going to talk quite a bit about art, Orthodoxy, what it means to you as a creator, how it's changed creating things from pre-Orthodoxy to post-Orthodoxy, maybe even the part in between. You might be in the in-between stage. Who knows? But I do know that a lot of your early story, it's a great, I know bits and pieces of it, and I want to hear more about it. So let's start somewhere in the beginning, let's say, okay? So let's pretend nobody in the chat knows who you are. Okay. So, which we do know that they already do know who you are, because you've already been on the show a little bit before. But start from wherever you think is a good place to start, and tell me who's Daniel? Who's Daniel, and how did you get to art? That's a big question.
It is. I don't know how much of an intro you want, but I'll just kind of lay out the kind of broad scheme of things. So I was born in Walnut Creek, California, which is in the East Bay, in 1982. Grew up with a really beautiful, wonderful family in the suburbs. And a lot of my relatives growing up really pushed me towards art. So I had a bunch of aunts that were really lovely people that were all artists themselves. And so for all my birthdays and Christmases and all that kind of stuff, they would always get me art supplies. And so I've always been drawing and doodling and painting. And probably around middle school, I started getting into music. Mm-hmm. And so I got a paper route as a kid, and I spent 2 years on a paper route saving up for a guitar. And in high school, I started a band with my friends. And let's see here. So that was around the time where the invention of the scanner came out. And so this all kind of ties together. So we were in a band. We were really taking it seriously. And I was missing a lot of high school. I would ditch to band practice at my house. And so the way that I was able to do that under my parents' radar was that we used the scanner to make fake report cards.
Yes.
Yeah, so we did that for like freshman year and sophomore year. And then me and the other guitarist realized that, like, you know, being in a band is expensive, getting new equipment's expensive. And so we started like a whole side hustle where we were making fake report cards for our high school.
Okay.
Yeah. This will all get to a point eventually. And so
this is great. Keep going. I love it.
Yes. So we were like the kind of the young band in our like little scene that we're at. Like there was a bunch of really good older bands that were, you know, playing in bars and all that kind of stuff around town. And so we were like the little brothers that were always opening up for these guys. And so it got to senior year, and one of the administrators pulled me up into the office, and they're like, Dan, there's no way you're graduating. You're like barely ever here. We don't know what to do with you. And I was like, oh man, I think like the scheme is up. And so I had to go home and tell my parents for the last like 4 years, I had been lying to them, making fake report cards and doing the band thing. And it was like, you know, I had a really good family, and I didn't enjoy lying to them. Right. Like I felt really bad about that. And it was like time to come clean. And it was like 4 years of like pressure built up on my shoulder. And, so my dad is he was a conservative Italian from upstate New York. And my mother was like a flower child that grew up in Berkeley during the 60s. So kind of like the opposite ends of things.
Wow.
Yeah. And so my mother introduced me to music, and my dad enjoyed music, but he wasn't ever really like into it. And anyway, so I went and told my parents, you know, kind of like broke it down, and I was just like so scared and so apprehensive about the whole thing. And like, you know, I was expecting a huge blowout out of all of this. And, you know, I told my parents, they looked at each other, and I think my dad like looked at me and he's like, well, at least you're not retarded. Meaning like, at least that you showed some sort of initiative. Like you're not graduating from high school because you're too dumb to. It's just that you didn't want to. So anyways, so pretty much what I ended up doing was like I went to a continuation school and made up all the credits for high school in like 2 weeks and graduated.
Awesome.
And so after that, you know, my parents didn't know what to do with me in terms of like where to push me. And so they realized that I had the knowledge of the scanner and doing the fake report cards. And I was always the one that was like really interested in designing like the flyers for the bands and the shows and stuff. And so they suggested I go to graphic design college.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like my intro into some sort of art school, art program or whatever. And so I moved down to San Diego from the Bay Area and completely fell in love with graphic design, getting like a knowledge and like a how-to in art and that kind of stuff. And that was right around the time that I discovered graffiti. And, you know, up until that point, like I just saw like graffiti as like the kind of random trashy tags that you saw like defacing everything. But, you know, the more I looked into it, like there was an actual art to everything and like a style and all this stuff. And I completely became enamored by it and ended up, you know, pursuing art and, you know, pretty much I started painting and putting my paintings on MySpace. And like, I got really lucky in terms with who was viewing my art. And that kind of like was a big breakthrough for my little art career. And so, the first guy to discover my art was a guy named Johnny Cupcakes, who did like limited edition t-shirts in Boston. And then the second guy that ended up buying any of my art was the drum tech for Bad Religion, Bouncing Souls, Less Than
Get
Jake.
outta here.
Yeah, all these Warped Tour bands. And so I developed a relationship with Rhino, who's the drum tech at the time. And, you know, for the next like 6 years, whenever a Warped Tour would come around to the Bay Area, he'd invite me backstage and I get to meet all these bands. And then through that networking, I started selling my artwork to them and ended up getting a whole bunch of galleries in Southern California, around the LA Melrose scene. And and then that kind of launched like a nationwide little like art, you know, tour where I did galleries. And then, from there developed some of my artwork into toys. And then that's like a whole like subgenre of like art that's not really widely known. It's like pre-Funko Pops.
I think I see some behind you on the shelf there behind your head. Is that what I'm seeing? Yeah, I recognize that.
Yeah. So that's the Swanicorn. And so I decided to design something that was something that would be like more inclusive for all ages, whether like you're a guy or girl, old or young, like something creative that people could get into it. There's a story I don't know if you want me to get into the creation.
Yeah.
Okay, so The idea was the swan-corn, and so I have an older sister and a younger brother, and ever since we saw Billy Madison, that movie Billy Madison, we like affectionately call each other Schwans.
Oh, okay.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was with an ex-girlfriend at the time, and I was trying to design a birthday card for my sister, and like I drew a swan and then made it into like a unicorn. And like I just kept on adding different animal features and parts to it.
Yep.
And I was like, oh man, this is really cool. Like this would make a cool design. And I showed my girlfriend at the time, and she's like, that is the dumbest idea I've ever seen. I was just like, man, so not supportive of this, right? And so needless to say, we didn't last too long, but a gallery in Sacramento, California saw the design. It was like, we're all about it. We're going to design it, and we'll get into production. And so the idea of the Swanicorn is that it's like a limited edition collectible art toy, figurine, whatever. And I would do different versions of them. So that's kind of like the basic swan. Sorry, it's backwards. Basic swan. Yeah. I did like a flamingo swanicorn, any kind of animal pattern, whatever. Like I would just do different versions of it, and had a really successful show. Ended up making that like my full-time thing, doing commission works for collectors and other art shows. And then I moved up to Portland for a year, which was like one of the worst years of my life.
Because of Portland?
Yeah, I mean, Portland's like... It's a beautiful spot, but it was like right after around like the 2008 financial crash.
Oh,
and so like everyone from San Francisco moved to Oakland, and everyone in Oakland moved to Portland. And so I had some art friends, went up there for about a year, and it's just like, I'm from the Bay Area. There's always sunshine. It's California. It's beautiful, right? Not to say that Portland's not beautiful, but it's just like a year of rain. And like gloomy weather, no vitamin D. And like, it was just kind of a culture shock in the sense where it was just like, I thought that I was like, I was still pretty liberal at the time. Yeah. But like going up to Portland, I was like, wow, I didn't even know how much more liberal it could get in Portland. And it was just like, wow, like I don't fit in with any of these people. Like I don't know what any of these people do in their spare. Anyway, so I ended up moving back to California. My father was going through a bout with cancer. He ended up passing away, so I was there for my family. And then, basically was doing the art thing, but slowly kind of getting disillusioned by the whole process. And then in 2017, I moved out to Asheville, North Carolina. And so that's kind of like where, big change. That's a change. Huge change. And so that's kind of like when the conversion into Orthodoxy kind of started.
Okay.
And so that's basically the art career in a nutshell.
Yeah, because I want to stop you there only because I want to make that transition to Orthodoxy through because I've obviously been a fan of your art because A, we post it, B, I've told you, C, I tell other people about it, and
thank you.
It's interesting hearing your story because I can see a lot of that influence in the things that you make. And like I went back and I saw some of your older pieces, and you could see that it's still similar, but it's got less of a cleanness to it. Not a cleanness. Well, how would I say it's the smoothness that you're applying to it now. Like you have this like maybe bizarre is not a good way of putting it, but you have this contradiction in your art where you could kind of see like the punk aesthetics. At the same time, you can see like the graffiti stuff that you just described, but you can see like the sleekness over it. This like you're a perfectionist. It seems like you're very much a perfectionist, and you don't like any jagged lines. You want to make sure they're nice and smoothed out, and you can really see that in your story. To me, hearing you tell me for the first time the full story, I see that in your art. I can clearly see that in your art, like those three things, kind of present and sometimes fighting. If I can put it that way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So being that you can see that in your art, now let's go to the in-between part where you go from all of that stuff. Now you're in North Carolina and you're introduced to Orthodoxy. First of all, how were you introduced to Orthodoxy? How did that kind of blip on your radar?
That's like a whole other story I could get into, but it was a very slow process. So I moved to North Carolina. The only person I knew here at the time was my sister and her husband and my niece. And so I didn't know anyone and had a lot of time completely by myself and kind of isolated from things. Didn't have a friend group, didn't really have much. And,
what year are we talking about? Sorry, just so we can
2017.
Okay.
2017, 18. And so, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I was like peak shitlib, like all the way. And so, pretty much I met a couple other graffiti friends here in town that knew me from my artwork, and I was hanging out with them. And one day we got into this huge debate about Trump. So pretty much like, I was taking the position that he was a complete Russian agent and fell for everything hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
And, I had a really good friend who we were arguing, but it wasn't very adversarial. And he's like, I really think that you should probably look at this a different way. And he's like, well, just wait until the Mueller report comes out and we'll pick up this conversation. Mueller report comes out, and it was just like my entire life was built as like a house of cards.
Yep. And
as soon as that came out, where it's like, the media's completely been lying 24/7 for like 3 years or whatever about this. It was just like that card got pulled out and everything began to kind of topple. And so pretty much like, I was in a pretty dark and lonely spot, and then that happened, and it was looking back on it, it was like the necessary humility I needed to start a journey for truth. And so I started doing that, and I started listening to, the conservative political points of view. And that kind of led me to looking more into history in a different way, led me to the philosophers, and it led me to religion. And at the time, Jordan Peterson came on my radar, and he was talking about Christianity in a way that I never had heard before.
Yep.
And through him, I got introduced to Jonathan Pageau.
Yep.
And it was like...
That makes sense. Yep.
So the artistic, the symbolism, the religious, all that kind of stuff intersected. At the same time, I started, kind of the algorithm picked up that stuff. And I got introduced to like Jay Dyer and listened to a lot of his debates. And that was kind of like, over the course of a few years, I was, went from a very nihilistic atheist into a believing Christian. And so...
Glory to God.
Glory to God. And so, so I ended up, I was dating a girl at the time that all this stuff was going on. She was definitely like a hardcore truther, and so I was like, I kind of think that I want to start going to church. And she was like, okay, we can do that, and so we ended up going to Episcopalian church, that was down the road from my mom. So sidebar, my entire family from California ended up moving one by one into the area. Okay. So we're all here now. Yeah. So that's been a big blessing. But so down the road from her, there was a church. We ended up going there until there was a female preacher that came out. And I was like, we're done.
Yeah.
We're going to the next one.
Yeah.
Nothing against females, but I mean, even in elementary understanding of Christianity, that that's a huge red flag. So it's all right. Well, I was raised Catholic, and so I was like, okay, there's a beautiful Catholic church in the area, and I went and attended services at the Catholic church, and it was a very beautiful. It definitely reminded me a lot of my childhood, but there was something very cold and very unpersonal about it. Everyone showed up, did the thing, you know, and as soon as mass was over with, everyone just left.
Yep.
There wasn't like that sense of community, and it was like hard for me to reconcile community in church and like how that kind of played in, because it seemed a lot different than what I'd been reading and studying in the Bible. And so eventually, you know, everything kind of caught up, and Orthodoxy became more and more on my radar, and realized that there's a Greek Orthodox church in my community. And I went one day and attended a divine liturgy, and it was just like, I mean, how do you even describe your first divine liturgy? It was just like mind-changing. It was so beautiful. It was so weird. Yeah. Like, it was so different. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And like, you know, after the liturgy, there's like, you know, the coffee hour, and I was going to my car because I'm kind of a shy, introverted person. And like a couple of guys my age were like, hey man, like you got to come hang out with us during coffee hour. Mm-hmm. And like, I probably was there for like at least like 4 hours. And I was like, oh, this is like the community, like the actual like church aspect of it.
Yes.
And I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. And I felt really at home. And I left that coffee hour, and I was going into the parking lot, and the priest and one of the chanters were like walking out, and my priest ended up apologizing to the chanter for something. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't like they were fighting, or it wasn't like it was really like, you know, a huge thing, but I saw the priest, the authority, right, apologizing to the chanter. I was like, that's humility. Yep. Like, that's a guy living the faith, and like he wasn't too proud to, you know, humble himself to apologize. And it's like, I don't think I'd ever see that in a million years in the Roman Catholic Church from the priest, at least my experience. Yeah. And, you know, definitely, you know, I won't even bring up the Protestants. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, so I was like, okay, you know, this felt like home. And so, you know, pretty much I was like, okay, we're going to do this Orthodoxy thing. And probably like that week, I realized that my girlfriend at the time was cheating on me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, we're done with that. Yeah. And so it was like a very transformative period of time. And so I ended up, you know, having a one-on-one with the priest and being like, hey, like, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I really think that I'd like to commit to Jesus and Orthodoxy. And, you know, we had some catechumen classes, yada, yada, yada. About a year later, I was baptized.
That's a great story. I'm really happy you shared the whole thing, because it's great to hear people's stories because they're so different. Yeah, especially in Orthodoxy. I know every faith probably says the same thing, whatever. But I've heard a lot of conversion stories, and usually they're like 3 or 4. And everyone kind of recycles the same 3 or 4. Yeah. But in Orthodoxy, I really enjoy hearing the stories because they're so different. And they always start off with, like, especially if it's like someone that's American or Canadian that's never experienced that culture before, because they have that whoa moment where they're like, what is this? Yeah. You know, yeah. Like, what is this? And especially because you're an artist. So like, having walked into an Orthodox church for the first time as an artist, a painter, having done graffiti and all this stuff, right there, even if you had seen pictures of it through like watching Jonathan Peugeot's podcast and this and that, experiencing it firsthand, and you have the incense and you have the chanting, and it's like all your senses are kind of, you know, bombarded in a positive way. Yeah. What was that like, that moment? Like, I know you described it, but like as an artist, because I love to get an artist's perspective on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, truth be told, like, I have a beautiful church, but the iconography isn't done inside of it. So there's like the Iconostasis and that kind of stuff. But probably, you know, within a few weeks after, one of the parishioners set up like this trip where we went to like a field trip where it was like 12 of us from the church. We visited like 3 or 4 different churches around the area that did have all of the iconography done inside. And I mean, it, like, I don't know how to describe it. And if I really get into it, I may start crying, but it was like so beautiful and like really touched my soul. And particularly there's a parish in South Carolina, that's maybe like an hour and a half away from me, St. John the Ladder. And the church was built by Andrew Gould, which is one of Jonathan Pageau's friends. He's like the architect. Yep. And it was like, it was one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. And the iconography inside that particular church, it just like really touched my soul. And like the whole time I was just like, this is like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, you know? And like, I keep saying beautiful. I don't have a big vocabulary, so that's all I'm gonna. No,
you're good. You're good.
Keep going back to saying.
It shows on your face, in your words, your enunciation. Like you can tell, like it's a touching moment. You can use beautiful over and over again. We know exactly how you feel.
Well, it meant a lot to me because, like, you know, comparing the two different kind of art worlds that I've been into, like seeing art that is done with a purpose, that's very well executed, where it's not about the artist, it's about the intention of the art and its placement and its functionality, was like such a beautiful revelation to me, coming from the other art world where it's like, you know, just trying to make a big name for yourself, you know, shock value. There's no real, you know, real meaning to it. Like everyone can interpret it however they want to. And it's just like a very shallow, superficial view of art versus like art in a liturgical sense is like the alpha or like the pinnacle of what art should be. And it was just like, anyways, in that particular church that I really found particularly beautiful from the other ones is that it's designed to look like an Orthodox church in the South, in Appalachia. It doesn't look like it's this like Greek church, like transplanted or like a Rocor church. You know, it's this like beautiful church. It has like a Southern like wraparound porch around it to where people, you know, it's like all of the materials are made from local, you know, like local trees, that kind of stuff. So it looks like this Orthodox church has been there for hundreds of years. And so like the aesthetics of it just like really hit close to home in terms of like, oh, this feels like American Orthodox. It's an OCA church, but like it really felt like, okay, this is what like American Orthodoxy would look like, or like this is how you properly design something, or this is how different regional jurisdictions would design something, you know, to fit in.
I think that's I love that point, because also like some people forget that for a Greek person, because my only experiences of Orthodoxy for many years was just the Greek experience, whether it's in Greece or in Cyprus or in Canada. And then when I first saw, like I'd seen pictures, but when I first saw a Russian Orthodox church face to face, to someone that's like you know, an American that's never experienced Orthodoxy, it may look the same, but to a Greek person, it was a bit like, whoa, this is like our church, but not like our church. So having like an American version of it makes sense to me, because like on the outside, it kind of has the flavor of the country, the nation that it's in. And on the inside, it's God. It's God's place. You know what I mean? It's totally, I love that. I love that. Let me ask you a question on reverse perspective. As an artist, did that shock you, seeing iconography in that way, where like the reverse perspective is? Because I know when I was talking to a friend of mine who did a lot of band posters and stuff like that, I guess through the show or whatever, he started, I didn't even know he was watching the show. And then all of a sudden he messages me and he starts asking me questions about Orthodoxy. I'm like, this guy's like a hardcore punk rocker, like he'd be first in the pit, last guy out, you know, that guy. And I'm like, okay, why? And he was an artist. He wasn't a musician. Well, he was a painter, not a musician. And then he starts asking me about reverse perspective and all this stuff. And I was like, what's going on here, dude? He's like, well, you know, you had like these punk rockers and tattoos, and they were on your show. So I tuned in. I was checking it out. Then one guy was talking about, he was talking about Father Turbo. One guy's talking about icons and, you know, tattoos. So I went to go check it out to make fun of it. I was like, okay. And then I saw the reverse perspective, and then it got me thinking that, wait a minute, instead of me observing it and creating something from my perspective, it's God's perspective back at me. So all of a sudden it changed it snapped something in him. It made him kind of go, wait a minute, something's going on here. Yeah. And I wanted to get your take. How did you feel about the reverse perspective as someone that's never
experienced it? I mean, I went through, I kind of feel like I had like a failed art education. And then once I discovered iconography, like I dove in all the way in the deep end. And so I ended up reading a lot about it. And when it comes to the reverse perspective and the different perspectives that they use, you know, it was a revelation. You know, it's not something you get in a Western education. And so you realize how much theology is visually represented and how it's done. You know, so the perspective thing was like, you know, a game changer for me in terms of how things are done. You know, it blows my mind how much, I'm going to keep using the word beautiful, but like how much symbology and theology is able to be captured in a single picture. And then that, like, you know, the Greek iconographic tradition, it's like, it's mind blowing. And it's something that, you know, I fell immediately in love with, and it really kind of gave me a whole different perspective of like Western art. Because growing up, it's like, you know, everyone thinks that the Renaissance is like peak art. And then there's like, you know, different artistic traditions that spawn from that. And, you know, getting back to the source, which I think is iconography, it was just like everything that I'd ever been looking in terms of what art can do and what art is present in iconography. And it's getting, you know, historically more and more devoid as time goes on in Western traditions. So anyways, it was a revelation. I'll just put it that way.
No, it's and I think you're connecting with a lot of the people. I see a little bit in the chats. A lot of people can relate to your story and understand where you're coming from, and especially for artists. So let's move to a moment we've both experienced and we've both talked about. So now, how does this revelation, beauty, you keep referencing, how does this change the way you approach art now? Or how about the moment where you started to convert, to start moving your worldview towards an Orthodox worldview? How did that affect your art? Because I know for myself, it most definitely did, coming back to the faith. And I would imagine for you, it would be even more shocking because it was all new to you. For me, it was kind of already in my music because I had Byzantine chants already in my music. So for you, how did you go through that phase? Or are you still in that phase?
I mean, I'm still on that phase. I'm working through it, but like essentially like I had spent 25 years as like, you know, doing my degenerate art thing. And then as soon as getting into Orthodoxy, it was like a car going 100 miles an hour, just slamming on the brakes. Yeah. And so, you know, I was like, okay, well, I'll try to do the iconography thing. And so before my baptism, every week I would paint like a couple different paintings and pass them out to the parishioners. And I got a call from my priest that's like, you got to cut that out. Like, you know, you need a blessing to do iconography. 2, you're not doing it right. So I was like, okay. So we ended up having a conversation about that. But probably for the first time ever, the year after my baptism, like I just stopped doing art altogether. Like I just didn't really know what to do. You know, I felt like I had a blessing, but like I couldn't go back to what I was doing. And the way that I saw things going forward wasn't open to me. And so I pretty much just stopped altogether doing artwork. And then basically like, because I needed money and to support myself, like I'd pick up random commission work for random album covers, t-shirt designs, you know, like highbrow art stuff. And so, you know, since then, and I'm still kind of working through things, but I think that there's I'm trying to kind of get rid of the presupposition of what I was doing artistically before my conversion, and looking at art in terms of more of like a craft. Right? Yeah. Like, you know, like lose the pretension of like, oh, I'm an artist, I do paintings, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you need like a greeting card, t-shirt design, like, you know, trying to fill in that void. And then in terms of what I'd like to do artistically going forward, you know, I'm still learning iconography. I'm still deeply inspired by it. I'm not exactly sure where I would like to go, but I feel like God gave me a gift. Not like I'm the greatest artist or anything, but, you know, God, you know, gave me this little gift to be creative artistically, and I'd like to pursue it. And so pretty much I feel like, you know, providentially God gives me projects. So like, for instance, like, you know, I see people that need art or that I could help, and, you know, without asking, like, I'll throw something together for them. Yeah. So like that episode where you're like, oh, we're doing a zine. I was like, oh, okay. Literally episode over. I'm on my computer. I'm like, oh, we're going to definitely make like a logo for like the cover of this. And I was like, all right, you know, and I'm still working on that. So forgive me for taking so long, but
no, not at all. Not at all. But first of all, for everyone that's listening, I've seen it. It's remarkable. Literally, Manny and I were freaking out looking at it. Daniel's being very modest. And then we're like, it's perfect. What's wrong with it? And then he mentioned something. I won't say what it is because I don't know if you want to unveil it just yet. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess so. That's how I knew you were a perfectionist. And I was like, I looked at all the lines. This guy is a perfectionist, and it's beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, you know, I if I'm going to do something for someone, I want to give them my best, you know? And so like, I don't want, you know, like there's been times where like I've phoned in art projects and it just never sat right with me. But I feel like, you know, if I'm going to, you know, we're called to serve. And so if I'm using my art to serve other people, I want it to, you know, highly reflect on the gift that God gave me. And I want it to work really well for the person that it's going to. You know, so I'm just trying to, you know, make sure that I'm not phoning in things and trying to do my best and try to, you know, So,
well, first of all, let me just say, I know exactly how you feel. I've been struggling myself as a musician, trying to get back into it. Like everyone kind of knows my story a little bit, but you know, I've always been a songwriter. I've never not been a songwriter. I don't do cover songs. So when I came back to the faith, I've struggled with it. I'm still struggling with it. And only now am I starting to find my way. And I'm doing similar to what you just described, kind of like just providentially, God will put it in front of you and then kind of give you and show you a direction. So first of all, your artwork is incredible, as I've said 100 times already. And I'm looking forward to working with you more and more, as much as you want or as little as you want.
You just let me know, man.
Definitely. And I think that's why a big part of this community we're all trying to build, like not just what we're doing at the board, no more, all of it. Everybody in the chat can relate to your story. Everyone in the chat's like, you should contact this guy and this and that. And I think through this process, we will all find our way. And I think you should continue creating and follow that. And tell your story through your creations. And if it means becoming an iconographer, it'll happen. If it means, you know, provide, because like for me, like I was asking myself, should I be a psalter? Like, should I go down that road? I've always loved Byzantine scales and hymns, and I've used it in my music always. You know, being Greek, it's kind of hard to separate, but that's not my thing. I would love to kind of be in church and try that out, but that's not my thing. So I think you can kind of relate to that
for sure
to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, the best art is always going to be authentically created, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I think, you know, we're in a similar boat, and within the last like week, I've been giving this thought a lot more attention, which is that I think, you know, there's, you know, the iconography and psalters and these kinds of things, like, you know, they're kind of like peak of like the totem pole, the hierarchy of stuff. But what you're doing here on the podcast, and what I think is the road forward, is culture creation.
Yes.
And so I think, you know, even if you don't become a Psalter and I don't become an iconographer, I still think that there's a blessed place for us to use our gifts in our community to kind of be a bridge between the secular and the holy. And I think that's a beautiful. I need like
saying it.
I think that's a wonderful role to play within the community. Yeah. And I definitely think that, you know, listening to some of the other people in the Orthodox sphere or whatever, it's like, you know, we need Orthodox dentists and restaurateurs and musicians and artists. Like, we need the culture to reflect Orthodoxy, because I think that's the thing that will bring it to a more mass scale and be able to speak to people's hearts. Yep. So, you know, instead of like evangelizing on a street corner or, you know, forgive me, but like having like debates where it's just contentious back and forth, I think you can really introduce, you know, something wonderful about Orthodoxy through just kind of like the, for lack of a better phrase, like the mundane, the simple, the general, you know? Exactly. And I think that's at least where like I feel like I'm being called to right now, where it's like, it doesn't necessarily, like, every song doesn't need to be all about Jesus, or every piece of artwork that I need to do needs all about Jesus. It's like, it's going to be, if it's authentically done, it's going to be informed by that, but it doesn't have to be that in its totality, if that makes any sense.
100%, because you can't even force it as an artist. If you sit there with an intention, like I've always written, and I've always appreciated art that was a little bit offbeat, a little bit off kilter. I'm a Tom Waits fan, of course. I love punk rock. So that nastiness, the realism of it is important to me, which is why I came back to the faith, because there is that with Orthodoxy. Yeah. And I think you're 100% correct. And creating this bridge as we culture create and we re-engineer their social engineering, I think this is a key way of approaching it, is exactly what you just said. We need dentists, we need restaurateurs, we need fashion designers, we need authors, painters, all this stuff that have that, but you don't have to force it. And every song doesn't have to be about, you know, praising Christ. But as long as the beauty is coming through, I'm using your beauty. As long as you're using, as long as the beauty of reality of life and that life force that comes from our Creator follows through and comes through our art, it will inspire others that are interested in. They'll be like, oh, you know, that's a great song, or that's a great piece. And like, what's up with this artist? And then all of a sudden they're Eastern Orthodox. Like, you know, they hear like an interview like this, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, that's crazy. That's an amazing way of going.
Well, a lot of people don't even, I still think, like, even though there's a lot of people converting to Orthodoxy, it's still like a mystery in this country. Oh, yeah. And it's like, you know, it's one way God can use to introduce Orthodoxy to different Americans. And so it's either going to be, you know, someone's going to hear a song and get into it that way. Someone may see some artwork and get into that way. Some people may, you know, it's how you interact with each other and that kind of thing. So I definitely kind of think that's my calling as of right now.
I think so too, and I definitely love you being around our community in general and being a big part of it. Because like I'm preparing for my interview tomorrow with Father Christopher, and you know, looking into some of the history of a lot of those like Luxury, Orthodox Outcast, a lot of those bands that came out of those other forms of Christianity or whatever, like that punk friend that I was talking about earlier, who got into art through trying to make fun of Father Turbo's iconography and tattoos, and all of a sudden it's starting to flip him, and he's asking me questions about Orthodoxy. The next step was he was listening to SOS Radio, and then he's like, Justin Marler, Luxury. He's like, these are great bands. So he starts sending me he starts sending me songs from Luxury, and I'm like, what's going on with this guy? So he's sending me Luxury, he's sending me Justin Marler, he's telling me about iconography and tattoos and stuff like that. And this person went into it to make fun of it, and came out of it with a lot of questions. And then so like I think you're on the right track, and I think you have the right zeal, and also you're very humble. I don't know if I think you are. I know you say you're not. Like, we've had some private conversations, and like I remember when someone was criticizing one of your pieces that we've talked about, your reaction is what I expected, but it's not what I would have expected from the average artist. You were very open to hearing the criticisms of it.
Yeah.
Is it okay if we talk a little bit about that? Is that okay?
Yeah, totally.
Well, do you want to give your experience on the criticism you got in the piece and all that?
Yeah. So, well, I've just kind of been exploring, kind of art in terms of, an Orthodox, and you're like, oh, this is pretty rad. Let me show it to Father Turbo.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Like, I love Father Turbo. He's been very, informative and just a beautiful soul. And, you're like, oh, yeah, he reached back out to me. And it was just like one line. It's like, this guy isn't properly initiated or something like that. And it was just like, big thumbs down. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, most people would kind of be upset if someone that they really looked up to was just like, yeah, no, this is trash. But I was like, okay, well, I mean,
he didn't say it was trash. Hold on. Yeah, he didn't say it was trash.
Fair enough. But he had not the reaction that I would hope for when it comes to that. But I mean, I try my best, and Lord knows that I need a lot of help with it, but I try to be humble. And so he has more of an authority when it comes to that kind of stuff than I do, And so, I think it's definitely grounded in the Bible, where it's like, you got to be open to being corrected, Yeah.
Yep.
And that's a lot of what I think was holding me back in my prior pre-conversion art career. It's like, no one could tell me anything. And so as the result, there was not a lot of growth. Right. And so it ended up getting stale, and I ended up getting frustrated, and, X, Y, and Z started happening. So, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to be clear on that, because Father Turbo, his response was more about like the symbolism that you were giving, and he was kind of just trying to say that there's like a type of guidance that's required, the initiation he's referring to, and I think your skill isn't the issue. It was just that you didn't understand that symbology is what he was trying to say.
Totally. Yeah, no, I get it. And not to sound crass, but I'm half retarded. So I'm not a very, very smart guy.
Not at all. No, so, I do not accept that.
Oh, well, okay. Well, yeah. Anyway, so I think I know what I'm doing. And then someone's like, yeah, man, you really missed that. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'm not that, I'm not the most well-read. I'm not, I went to graphic design school, but all the art stuff is self-taught. I've pretty much been that punk rock DIY. It's like, okay, I'm just going to try to figure it out on my own,
Right.
And so, that's kind of my style, I guess.
I think, I like what you produce because it has a lot of that. Like I said earlier, I can clearly see the punk rock roots. I could see the graffiti roots. I could see the perfectionism in there. And I can see now in your newer pieces, the God-inspired energy is coming through. You can clearly see it, and I can also see, and this is not a bad thing, this is a good thing. I think artists need to struggle internally with their art. If there isn't that struggle, you're not producing. And I think you're in that healthy phase where I'm in right now, where I'm struggling. I've never had what's the word where you can't, writer's block. I've never had writer's block. I was always the kind of guy that could pick up a guitar and I could write a song on the spot. Totally. But lately I don't feel the same when I do it. Yeah. And for me, I'm not saying I'm struggling with demons or something, but I could feel that there's a block there of something.
Oh, for sure.
And then every once in a while, there's a break, and then it just bursts. And I see that in your art right now. I see you're at that point. Do you feel that way?
Oh, well, I mean, I hope maybe I'm at the point where the wall's being burst open like the Kool-Aid guy. But there's definitely that writer's block, you know what I mean? That's some days I feel like it's still there. Some days I think okay, I've broken down enough of the wall to get through to the other side. But we're doing things now with a different intention than what we were doing them for originally.
Yes.
So there's a whole new way of looking at, not just what we're doing, but a lot of it, or at least for me, is why am I doing this?
Yes. Yes.
It's not, it's not just because like you said, you could just pop out songs pre coming back to Christ. And then it's kind of now you're okay, wait a minute. What am I doing? Mm-hmm. Same thing with my art. I would crank out a mass amount of paintings in a week. you know, like
Yep.
I think on my Instagram page, like there was that whole pumpkin series that I did just to make some money, some quick money during like a Halloween. Like I did, you know, maybe like 20 of those paintings in like a week, you know? So like I was, you know, cranking them out, and it's like, now it's like, I really have to be like almost force myself to get creative again and be like, okay, well, what's the purpose of this, or why am I doing it? Or,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, I'm still working through things, but hopefully, you know, it'll resolve itself at some point.
This just popped in my mind. Like, it just came to me. Maybe the reason is kind of like what the point was trying to be made with Father Turbo saying the initiation part. Maybe we're realizing, I'm just thinking out loud, so this could be totally wrong. And if there's anybody like listening that thinks that, just let me know if I'm off. Maybe we have to internally, like what I was saying earlier with the SOS radio episode earlier, in the last couple of streams I've done, it's like a responsibility, and the responsibility is kind of intense. And to some degree, I don't like it. Whereas before that's not me. Before I would have been like, yeah, I'll take that. No problem. I'll be the first one in. I don't, you know, and now I'm just kind of like, maybe I don't want to be, you know what I mean? Like, am I doing the right thing? And I think being careful with that and prudent with that, and kind of going through the steps is the initiation that was being referred to by Father Turbo. Now that I'm thinking about it, and maybe like trying to, you know, correctly write or create, maybe correct isn't the right word I'm trying to say. The proper inspiration has to be there, I think. There is a responsibility in what we're doing. Maybe that's what's happening with us. Because I think we're both in the same space. For sure. I definitely think that's a part of it. I think, you know, going back to a point that you kind of brushed upon briefly is like the idea of struggle. Yeah. Like there's, you know, at least post-conversion for me, I've had a really different take on the idea of struggle itself. Yes. And it's like, you know, struggle is the way that I'm of the opinion that's what produces good fruit. Yes. And it's like so much of the Western mentality is like devoid of struggle. Everything has to be convenient, easy, quick. And it's like, I think, you know, with us, that struggle is kind of like, you know, baptism through fire. It's like, okay, you need this struggle because this is the way you're going to get to that next step that God, I think, has designed us to get to. Yeah. Does that make sense? That. It does. I feel so. It's like, you know, I'm trying to, you know, as much, you know, there's a huge part of me that's like, I don't want any struggle. I want it to come easy. I want it, you know, to go back to the way it used to be. But, you know, the louder voice in my head, or the louder, you know, angel on my shoulders, like, no, like really like focus this time to embrace that struggle and like fight through it and work through it, because what's waiting for you on the other side is what God's intended for you to have. And it's like, I like that. I like that. And this fasting period has been like, just like the last one was, it has been a struggle. And I think the humbleness of asking for help, to help from God, help from your church father, help from a friend when you're struggling. I think, because I know yesterday when I had my moment and I reached out to a few people, within an hour or two, I felt this. Not that everything was okay or taken away from it, but I felt this. I don't know how to say it in English. Thados. It's like courage and energy. It's like a word that kind of combines both. And I was like ready to work. And I think that what you just said with struggle and being having that humility to ask for help, I think as artists it brings it out of us. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely think so. There's so I mean, you know, with everything being said, I think that's like, we're definitely in very, very similar situations. And I think that we can help each other. And I think that's part of what's really great about, you know, what you've built. Like there's a wonderful community. I can't see the chat right now, but hello to everyone in the chat. I'm barely looking at it because it distracts. Yeah, but it feels like a family, and it's like, that's, I think, you know, I've had this conversation with a few different people that, like, you know, God is love, and he gave us this church because you can't just sit on your couch alone
and praise God. Like you
Yes.
need a community of people, because only in that community are you able to share love or to actually, actually love. And so
Yes.
part of love is helping other people and then asking for help.
Yes.
And so I think that's, community, church, it's like can be a synonymous use of terms. And so it's like, yeah, we all need each other. Like we can't do it alone. And so, that gives the people that can help the ability to help, and the people that need to be helped the ability to be helped. So
I really love the way you put that, and it is what we're trying to all do here, all of us.
Yeah.
When I say we, I don't just mean Manny and myself. I mean literally everybody that's in the chat, everyone that tunes in, everyone that reaches out. I think that this is important because of all the things you just said. A lot of people don't feel that they're alone, but they are. Sometimes they don't realize it until moments like this occur. There's a lot of arguing. There's a lot of fighting out there. On many levels, and even within our own community. And we don't have to all agree. Good artists don't always agree with the other guy. You have to argue with each other. You have to have struggles. And I think you put that really well. I love that you worded it that way.
Thanks.
This community is that. What did you say? You said it was almost like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like almost like true love requires other people to love within a community and back and forth.
How do you practice love if you're just by yourself in your room alone? Like you can't. And I think that, modernity, modernity is very isolating. And a lot of people are isolated, and like, with the advent of technology, like we're more disconnected from each other now than ever. And maybe that's by design or whatever, but it's like, when you're with people is when you have the ability to love and be loved. Amen. And, if that's kind of the lens in which you view the world or the mentality you take to situations, I know from my own personal experience, like a lot of that bickering and arguing and like, that kind of falls away when you kind of try to really pick up your cross and follow Christ, like try to love each other. It's like, yeah, of course. Like I have a lot of a difference of opinion with a lot of people. And like, I mean, I don't even agree with myself most of the time. So it's like, and so it's like, a loving way to realize that even through differences of opinion, no matter how big or small they are, I try to remind myself all the time that we're all created in God's image, right? So we're all capable of love, and we're all capable of being loved. And, whether it's like some blue-haired shitlib or like, another Orthodox person that, I disagree with on a fundamental level, I do my best to try to look past that. At the end of the day, like, at least from my catechism, it's like, I mean, this is like straight from Father Turbo. It's like, you're the problem. And then we externalize it on everyone else. And it's like, I realized like, I'm not even sure if I realize how bad of a person I am. I'm still like going through that and working through that. But that being the case, it's like, I don't have any time to worry about your bullshit. Like I got enough of my own to deal with. And like, I really want to, I'm really doing my best to like get rid of that, and work on myself. And like, hopefully through that, it's like that, Saint Seraphim of Savra, the idea of like, once you find peace, 1,000 people around you will be saved.
Yes.
And it's like, I feel like that, we're all in a way like called to be that. I don't think, maybe only by God's grace I'll get there, but at least that's the direction to head towards, where it's like, it's completely unpeaceful times. And I think, the only way you're going to get peace is through Christ. And it's like, a peaceful person in a horrible situation is going to do a lot more than like an argument about the filioque or like some other, controversy that's like, whatever, man. Like, I'm not sure if I have time for that anymore. So
I fully agree. I fully agree. And that's kind of like how I've been feeling a lot. A lot of us have. A lot of us have. And I love that this community that we're all building, a lot of people feel like this. A lot of people in our little section of the internet feel like this. And I think you nailed it. And I think we need to look at ourselves first. I know it's been said 100 times.
Yeah.
I know this year's been a struggle for all of us. For me personally, it's been a really tough year. And the best lessons I've ever learned were those moments where I was going to snap. Like, and I wouldn't snap on someone, but like internally I was going to implode and I was going to fall back to the passions and go to my vices and all that. Yeah. And then I just somehow, you know, did that thing where you're the problem. And I would look at myself in the mirror and say like, dude, you're having this issue because you're the problem. You got to deal with your stuff, you know, your baggage. And I had when I had Father John Valdez on, and he was talking about his description of the noose and how he described it as a dirty mirror, and we're all the image of God, and it's reflected back of us in the mirror, and our noose is just like a dirty mirror, and we have to always clean that mirror, but every once in a while it gets dirty again. For sure. It's never fully clean. It's never fully clean, and I think that's an important thing that you have your mirror, I have my mirror. Yeah. And if collectively we have these open conversations, maybe someone might not feel as much of a jerk to themselves listening to this conversation. They'll be like, I'm not the only one that's a jerk. You know what I mean?
And if I may add, like, another note on that is, like, you know, we're called to serve, we're called to be merciful, right? And I think a lot of people would do well to internalize that, which is like, you got to show mercy to yourself. Like, you have to love yourself. Like, you know, I think the inverse of that leads to like a weird ego vainglory where, you know, you start going down a rabbit hole, you know, and it's like, you know, you have to realize, I think there's a, you know, one of my favorite, if not my favorite saint, soon to be saint, hopefully, Seraphim Rose. He was like a big deal to me. Still is. Yeah. But, you know, there's some quote that I'm going to like completely butcher, so forgive me, but it's something akin to like the idea of like, God sees you, who you are and where you are. Yes. And like, you know, we're not all the most saintly people. And so we're all in different points of our spiritual journey. And it's like, okay, like, you know, that's for a providential reason, whether we understand it or not, but it's an opportunity to try to like humble ourselves and try to, you know, realize, you know, we have to take care of ourselves too. And taking care of ourselves is forgiving, you know, ourselves for the bad things we do and being merciful and doing all the things we're supposed to do to serve Christ, but also apply them to ourselves. I think so. I mean, then again, like, I'm not, you know, I'm really new to Orthodoxy. So if I'm have it completely wrong, someone please correct me, you know, but I think that's probably something worth pointing out.
Yeah, I think so too. It's like a both and, you know, it's often said in Orthodoxy, whatever, but as long as like you're doing your best, I think, to constantly clean that mirror, and when you fall, stand back up again, because I think that's one of the beauties of Orthodoxy for me, and I've said this 100 times, but I don't think I'm going to stop saying it, is that it is a hospital. We are all sick. That's it. And just because you had the flu last week and then you don't have the flu this week, you know, next year you're going to get the flu again. Like, you're going to always get sick again, right? So I think it's one of those things.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful analogy, and I'm really happy that you brought that up. If it's spiritual sickness, like if someone's dying of cancer, you don't yell at them. Right. You know what I mean? Like, you treat them with love. And so that should be the same way we apply it to ourselves, where it's like we're all spiritually sick. And so, you know, one of the things that I struggle with is that when I do fall into sin, not to fall into despair. You know, and I think that's, you know, that, you know, if I go down that rabbit hole, like, you know, despair is not good. Part of it is like ego and vainglory. And the only way to like, for me to like battle through that stuff is to try to apply those Christian principles to myself and not just to other people, where it's like, okay, like, you know, it's not good that you sin, but, you know, it's a grace and a blessing from God that he's shown me how I've sinned. And it's like, okay, like, I'm not perfect. I'm still struggling. You know, I need help. I'm spiritually sick. And instead of looking at it in terms of like a Western legalistic way of looking at things, it's a Eastern spiritual way. It's like, okay, I'm sick. Like, what else would you expect from me? Like, I was like a shitlib for like 40 years of my life. Like, you know,
Right.
I'm going to have a whole bunch of bad habits that I'm still trying to get rid of.
Yeah, I really feel this because I had Christina from Orthodox Family Life on Tuesday, which I'm going to be putting that episode out right after we're done this. And we were talking a little bit quickly about 304s and like, you know, forgiving all that stuff. And I felt a little bit conflicted after having the conversation. I agreed with everything I said and what I was saying, but I think it's important to realize, and it's kind of the point I was trying to make on Sunday when I went off on my rant, was that whether it's that subject or whatever subject whatever perspective we look at it as, I think it's important to take accountability for actions.
Yeah.
And then confess and then repent and then know that you're going to probably fall off again. And that if someone has done something that they regret or is a sinful thing, you know, not beating yourself up over it is important. Understanding that that's presented in front of you as a way to heal. I think those things are like methods to healing, right?
Yeah.
If you deal with it, you know, if you deal with the issue that's before you, and then the most important part is that when you do fall off again, you know that you're sinning or you're committing an act that you maybe shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
But not to beat yourself up about it, but also not to excuse yourself either is my point, right? And I don't think that either of us are doing that. Sorry, 1 second, because but it is very like a Protestant approach, you know, like once saved, always saved type of thing. To know that at any point, any one of us can fall off, you know, like the ladder of divine ascent. I always messed up that, and you see that ladder, and even the holiest of holies can fall off that ladder at any point. And just kind of knowing that, but not beating yourself up over it, but not excusing it, because I do know people that are like, I'm just going to do this thing because I know I'm going to be forgiven, you know, like that kind of thing.
No, I'm very glad that you brought that up, because it's a royal path situation, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, you got to take responsibility for your sins, and then also you have to forgive yourself and like move on and not just like dwell on, you know, your spiritual sickness or whatever. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. That's like a really, really good point.
I think it's also important for artists, and which is why I brought it up, because artists will beat themselves up. That struggle, that internal struggle, like I don't think I know any good artist that doesn't beat themselves up. They're like their worst critic.
Oh, for sure. And that's I mean, I think that's like across the board, musician, actor, artist, whatever you do creatively, like you're the first critic and probably your worst. So
absolutely,
I get that.
My dear brother, thank you so much for doing this. This won't be the last conversation for sure. It won't be. Any final thoughts, comments, and please plug yourself.
Okay, well, I haven't really been plugging too much of my art stuff, but me and a fellow parishioner started an Orthodox soup company. That's all vegan, organic, no pesticides. And we're hoping that by the end of the year, we'll be able to ship it across the country. So the name of the website is feastofedenfood.com, Feast of Eden. And so that's kind of like what I'm doing, like as like my quote unquote 9 to 5. So, you know, it's not available yet to anyone outside our local area, but it will be soon. I can testify it's delicious food. Other than that, I want to thank you for the opportunity and thank Vanny. It's always great to talk to you guys. I'm looking forward to the next conversation. Wanted to say hello to everyone in the chat.
Yes.
Hello, chat. It's a great chat. I love you guys a lot. And last word is just, you know, try to find opportunities to show mercy for each other and to pray for each other, because I think that's important.
Yes, I love that. And I love that the chat does that. Everybody kind of prays for each other and sends each other like messages. I think that's great. Well, Daniel, again, thank you for doing this. Thank you for being a key member of the chat and a big part of the community.
My pleasure.
And I thank you so much for like even thinking about how to like help out and you know, with the zine and all of this other stuff. And just always know yourself or anyone else that's out there helping us. In the end, we will be helping right back. We're trying to make this like a like bring it around
reciprocal.
Kind of
Yeah.
Well, yes, reciprocal.
I'm not, you know, I don't do this to get something back. I do it because we're called to serve, right? And it's like, okay, like I know one last thing is like,
no, yeah, take your time.
From the way that I used to be, it's like I was so selfish all the time. And it's like, oh man, like, you know, if I only focus on myself, like I never was getting what I wanted and the people around me never got what they wanted. But it's only through serving people that I've been able to really like find peace and enjoyment, and it's helping them out. And it's also helping me out. And it's like, that's it, man. Like, obviously, you know, Christ is the truth, but he was right. He wasn't wrong. It's like, we're here to serve other people. And it's like, there's a reason why it's designed that way. And it's like, when you really like try to do that more and more, it's like, you know, it's been really eye-opening for me, like, you know, how wonderful it is to be able to help people that you love. So.
Yeah, no, just to be clear, the reason why I said that is that because that is what makes it all kind of work, is all of us helping each other and just letting people know. I know that you weren't expecting anything, or nobody else that's trying to help us. I know that they're not expecting anything in return, but we do look at it that way. And we have like the reverse thing. Like, we're sitting around trying to come up with ideas of like, what can we do to help out our members on Patreon and other things like that. And I just want to give everything, like, you know what I mean? I'm struggling with that weird thing, you know, even with the zine, we're trying to figure out how do we do this? And, you know, and I think that the key for our little community that we're building for all of us and everyone that's a part of it is the giving aspect of everybody kind of going around in circles. And I think that's why I was bringing it up. So, of course, we're going to plug all your stuff. We're going to include all your links in the description. We'll share all your art as well as East of Eden. Sorry, what'd you call it? East of Eden?
Feast
of Eden. Feast. Sorry. I think somebody dropped in East of Eden in the chats and it kind of threw me off. But we'll definitely post all of that. And thank you. Yeah, brother, we'll see you real soon.
Thank you.
Adios, my dear friend.
Have a good one, bud.
What happened? Oh, 1 second. Daniel left. Sorry, what would we have? Sorry, 1 second.
Donated $10. Says, great show.
Oh, thank you so much. Who was it? Sorry, I didn't hear you because your mic was off.
Girl Hacks.
Oh, Girl Hacks. Thank you so much. Everybody, I want to thank each and every one of you guys for joining us in the chats. Sorry, I'm not used to doing live stream interviews, so I ended it like abruptly there. I'll definitely make sure to edit that nicely. I think Daniel left. Daniel, if you're still around, I love you, brother. Thank you so much for that interview. And everyone that's joined us, as always, thank you guys so much for being a part of this. If anyone has anything they want to contribute to the zine or any of that stuff, please reach out to us. We're definitely interested. Everyone go follow Daniel, follow his Instagram, follow his websites, and we're definitely going to be putting this out the way I'm planning on doing this, just to explain. The same with the Orthodox Family Life podcast episode that I did with Christina, which was really great conversation about family, Orthodox women, their importance in the community and all of that. She's amazing, incredible. I'll be putting that episode out today. And then I'm going to take this episode. You could watch it as a live thingamabob, but I'm going to clip it and put it out again. The same thing as I did with Joseph. So if anyone else wants to reach out and be a part of the show and be interviewed or this and that, send us a message. We want to hear your stories. Love you guys. Have yourselves a great afternoon. And we'll definitely see you Sunday for SOS Radio if you're around. Usual time. We tried 7 Central Standard Time last time. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll either 7 or 8 Central Standard Time. And thank you guys. Word to Big Bird and Jing Jangs, all that stuff.